say he has given one person a job opportunity, George Galloway.
More than 15 years ago, in Parliament, on the record, I made clear my detestation of the Iraqi dictatorship. I just don't believe in murdering people's children because you don't like their dictator. If people are not held to account for, at the very minimum, the mistakes that they've made, at the very worst, the crimes that they've committed, then why would anyone avoid those crimes or mistakes in the future? If you can, with impunity, set the world on fire and go on to make £100 million, which Tony Blair has done, why would others not go down that path too?
I've met Saddam Hussein exactly the same number of times as Donald Rumsfeld met him. The difference is Donald Rumsfeld met him to sell him guns and to give him maps, the better to target those guns. I met him to try and bring about an end to sanctions, suffering, and war, and on the second of the two occasions, I met him to try and persuade him to allow Dr. Hans Blix and the United Nations weapons inspectors back into the country. A rather better use of two meetings with Saddam Hussein than your own Secretary of State for Defense made of his.
The media is deeply complicit in all of these crimes. It completely failed in its duty to hold leaders to account, to test their arguments. It became an echo chamber for Blair, and all the lies they told, they have never atoned for. And in fact, they've continued to repeat them in one conflict after another in this whole miserable affair.
I opposed this program with all my heart. Not because Saddam was getting kickbacks from it, and I don't know when it's alleged these kickbacks started. Not because some individuals were getting rich doing business with Iraq under it, but because it was a murderous policy of killing huge numbers of Iraqis. That's what troubles me. That's what troubles me.
Something which is a crime and a blunder, which has achieved the opposite of the effect that it was supposed to, which has made thousands of new bin Ladens, in fact tens of thousands of new bin Ladens. You've got 1.5 billion Muslims out there boiling with anger at us, made the whole world a much more dangerous place, left your own country not trusting a word you say. I mean, the reason Blair is going because nobody believes him any longer, just the Egypts in the bubble at the Labour Party conference. The rest of the country no longer believes a word he's saying.
Is in the audience at the editor McGill. You would take issue with George?
I would. I just think it'd be wonderful to have as simple a view of the world as George has. I mean, if these men are evil men and are war criminals, what does that mean that Saddam Hussein is? This is a man who invaded two neighbouring countries, a force for instability for 10 to 15 years, massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians, not deaths which happened through matters of war or airstrikes. You know, Blair didn't willingly go out and cite, I think I'll gas the Kurds, I think I'll gas the people of Birmingham, or I'll kill hundreds of thousands of Shiite Muslims in the south, as Saddam did. This is a man who George used to go over and cozy up to and thought he could find reasonable. Perhaps that was the two cheeks of the same arse there that you were kissing at the time. And you've made a career of it. I admire your principles and I know you're motivated and so on, but I think your view is utterly wrong-headed, and the fluency with which you deliver it I think is really damaging, because it means that throughout the world where we have people like Saddam or Hitler or Mugabe or the situation in Myanmar, we can't intervene because you'll come along and say immediately that those democratic countries doing so, with or without a UN mandate, are war criminals.
Where'd you get that, agent?
He's the editor McGill. He's a respected journalist in this town.
Charge then, George? It's making a career out of it.
I don't even know who you are, so you're not anybody to charge me.
I'm not a celebrity.
It does matter. No,
I'm
it
not
does
a celebrity
matter.
like you are.
It does matter. It does matter now that I know you're the editor of McGill. It's absolutely shocking that an editor is so ignorant and ill-informed about these great issues. First of all, he's got all his numbers wrong. We've killed far more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein ever did. Secondly, I'm dealing with Saddam Hussein. When Britain and America were arming Saddam Hussein, I was outside his embassy demonstrating for human rights and for justice in Iraq and being denounced by the British and American governments and the big newspapers for causing trouble, because Saddam was a bosom buddy of Britain and America. You want to talk about gassing the Kurds? Who sold them the gas?
I know,
it wasn't me.
That's
It wasn't
83. That's 83.
you want to start the clock when you want to start it.
Well, you could go back and back forever. Like
No,
they armed Iraq to match Iran. Move to 1990 when Saddam invaded Kuwait.
No, why do you want to
wholesale,
start the story at you want to start the story at 1990.
Well, we go back to 1945.
Well, no, go to 1945. Go to 1988.
Tell us about
1988, just 2 years before the date you want to start on. The bombing of the Kurds in Halabja was done with weapons given to Saddam by Britain and America and West Germany.
Now, it was done by Saddam.
Yes, but he was able to do it because of weapons that we gave him, because of the immoral principle that was in vogue at the time, that my enemy's enemy is my friend. The very principle which brought us Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was equally armed and supported by Britain and America because we thought that you could have a tiger by the tail. We now know differently.
Weapons are sold throughout the world.
The Western
they end up in the wrong hands.
Something had to be done. It didn't end up in the wrong hands. They ended up in the hands they were intended to.
What was your solution?
Bin Laden.
Against sanctions. You're against sanctions.
Bin
what was
Laden.
your solution?
Bin Laden. I'm speaking through the chair because that's what I'm used to doing.
Yeah.
We're going to have a harangue. I wasn't expecting this, but you're welcome
You're
to have a
easy ride,
stairhead.
did you,
You're welcome
George?
to have a stairhead brawl with me
This is
if
not
you
like.
like.
I'll
go.
I mean, you two are never going to agree, that's for sure.
Well, I don't know who he is, so I don't
All
know
right,
if we're
but-
ever going to agree.
All right.
You'll forgive
Can
me.
I ask you another question, George? Did you say that the assassination of Tony Blair could be morally justified?
I said if you were an Iraqi whose home had been destroyed, whose country had been broken into 1,000 pieces, whose sons were in Abu Ghraib prison being tortured, whose house had been demolished, whose job had been disappeared and privatized, and whose street was occupied by foreign soldiers, I've no doubt you could make a good moral case for the assassination of Tony
If you
Blair.
found out of a plot that would do for Tony Blair, what would you do about it?
I would tell him. I would tell him. And
You would
I'd-
save his life.
I would tell him and I'd say, do you remember that conversation we had outside the gentleman's lavatory? You should have listened to me. And hundreds of thousands of people that are dead now would still be alive. The world would not be destabilized. And the only man in Ireland, the editor of McGill, would be the only man in the country who thinks you and Bush did a good job. And I think that if I got that chance to speak to Tony Blair, to warn him of that plot, it would be for this reason, that the assassination of Blair would merely strengthen the hand of people like him who want to go around the world invading other people's countries, setting up regimes that are more to their liking, because they see the world as a kind of white man's burden that somebody, God perhaps, gave us a job of setting to rights in our own image. I find that attitude disgusting, and most disgusting in Ireland, a country that was occupied by colonialism for hundreds of years. And you've got people justifying colonialism now calling themselves editors of radical magazines.
In the
You
past.
killed a
That is
million
separate-
people in Iraq.
That is a separate.
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I would be there tomorrow, living up to my responsibility to answer the call of the Iraqi government and people to help to support them. And the fact that you aren't is something that you will have to live with.
Let me ask a final question to you, George. If not bombing, if not intervention, how do we deal with this cancer?
Give Iraq the weapons that it's already paid for but haven't been delivered. Strengthen the Peshmerga. Strengthen the governments of Iraq and Syria, and ask Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Iran to fight this battle. It's their battle, not ours.
We have now had an election where two of the candidates have alleged intimidation. The Prime Minister referenced that intimidation in his address on the steps of...
to the Prime Minister as if that's supposed to impress me. The Prime Minister is the Prime Minister is a rather diminutive, diminished and degraded politician. He made a party political statement. I don't care about Rishi Sunak's attitude. What I care about is that the returning officer, a man of unimpeachable integrity, I'm sure you'll agree, declared it a free and fair election, and me as the winner, and Rishi Sunak as one of the crushed two big parties in the state.
So why are two candidates?
Keep repeating the same questions to me because I have other people to talk to. So let's make this the last one, shall we? We got a party to deal with.
Allegations of intimidation, allegations that your supporters intimidated other candidates.
What times you've said that? The returning officer declared it last night. You were there as a free and fair election, and me as the winner.
And the Electoral Commission today have said that they're going to talk to the parties.
Have to just suck it up. I won the election.
George Galloway, thank you very much indeed.
I put it this way. This is not the Holocaust. 1,000 people is horrific, but it is not the Holocaust. The Holocaust involved millions upon millions of people, perhaps 10 million or more. Well over half of them Jews. Systematically, industrially, building factories in order to annihilate people, and with a clear and defined genocidal purpose. This is not the Holocaust. And Israel are not the Nazis, but they are behaving like Nazis. In this current conflict, the dark heart of Zionism and its ideology and practice has been exposed. And I said during Cast Lead, and I'm saying it again now, and the furore about it during Cast Lead was great. The furore about it now is not, because it's kind of obvious. This may not be, and is not, the Holocaust, but it is the Warsaw Ghetto. In fact, it's the Warsaw Ghetto in almost every particular. The Nazis built a ghetto in Warsaw, surrounded it by barbed wire and guards with dogs, and allowed the people inside to waste away and starve, and to will the contraction of fatal disease which began one by one to wipe out the Jews entrapped in the Warsaw Ghetto. Deciding that they would rather die on their feet than die one by one on their knees or their bed, or wait for their captor to come along and put them on a train to a gas chamber and kill them, the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto rose up and wrote their name in the stars. The Nazis called them terrorists. They actually used that word. Everybody else regarded them as heroes, as freedom fighters. I maintain that the situation in Gaza is exactly comparable to the situation of the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. I believe that that is a fair comparison. The situation in Gaza has gotten far worse since I was last there, as you may know, during Cast Lead. Some of you may even have been with me. I led first one and then several siege-breaking convoys which entered Gaza and broke the siege, bringing material aid, but more importantly, raising the banner of Palestine all the way through the countries that we traveled and lifting the spirits of the people entrapped in Gaza. So their attitude to human rights in other countries should be viewed through the prism of poor Julian Assange, a truth-teller, a whistleblower, a publisher and a journalist who has now languished for years behind bars now in a maximum security prison in the capital of the United Kingdom, which professes to be a champion of human rights and which lectures other countries on their shortcomings or failures in the field of human rights. Thirdly, the Western countries have no problem at all firmly allying themselves with countries that care nothing at all about human rights, not even pay lip service to the question of human rights, who murder their journalists, who banish any person who speaks out against the prevailing current, who crack down, make impossible any dissident view, even when those dissident views happen to be right and happen to be calling out the extent to which the country that they live in is sailing in entirely the wrong direction, fast towards the rocks. I don't need to name those countries, but you all know which kind of countries I'm referring to, who receive endless subvention of weaponry, of money, of political and diplomatic support, of propagandistic support, even though the very last thing in the world they are is a democratic and free society. So the so-called free society, always lecturing others on human rights, are highly selective about the countries that they are lecturing. Which leads me to my conclusion, long ago reached, that the Western imperial countries care next to nothing about human rights, even in their own countries. They wear it as lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig when you wipe the lipstick off. They wear it or brandish it as a weapon with which to isolate, traduce, ostracize, and if necessary, militarize their own countries and their own societies against the people that they are beating with the stick marked human rights.
When you are told that the resistance in Gaza is hiding behind the civilian population, is using the civilian population as human shields, when you're told, why are the weapons so close to the people in Gaza? Gaza is 25 miles long and 4.5 miles wide. It is one of the most densely populated places on the earth. There is no open space in Gaza. There are no mountains. There is no jungle. There is no place where the resistance could go, even if it were wise for them to do so. The resistance are the people. It's not an army. The Palestinians don't have an army. They have fighters who are living in this hellhole and bearing arms for the day, which comes often enough, when their hellhole is invaded, their families massacred. That little that they have is destroyed all around them. They say, why are there rockets amongst the population? The question is not why there are rockets amongst the population. Everything and everybody is amongst the population. The question is, why are there rockets?
I want to talk about the role of NGOs. I was in the audience when Fidel Castro in Cuba more than 30 years ago described NGOs, especially those active in the field of so-called human rights, as a Trojan horse sent through the gates by their Western benefactors, only to disgorge their army of subverters, destabilizers, purveyors of color revolutions as soon as the time is right. Castro banned these NGOs from Cuba, and every country should at the very least beware of non-government organizations, because increasingly they are very definitely GOs. They are government organizations. They are AGOs. They are anti-government organizations in your country, serving the interests of the country that sent them, that funds them, that provides the overarching narrative for them, and which gives them their marching orders. Beware of the Greeks bearing gifts is a well-known saw in the English language. It was the Greeks that sent the Trojan horse through the gate, apparently as a gift, apparently as a benefaction, but with the gravest of ill intentions. My advice to everyone watching and listening to this is not to believe that the governments of the West or their arms in the NGOs are genuinely concerned for your people, your peoples. Their purpose is to serve the interests of the already rich and powerful, the hegemonic forces who fear they are losing daily their once overwhelming power in the world.